Hi, my name is Tina and I'm a mute, so today, you'll be hearing the free text-to-speech translator natural readers. Before we jump into this video, I'd like to thank you all for the 10 subs and the overwhelming support. It means a lot and I hope to keep you all happy. I know in my last video I said today was going to be old school versus RuneScape 3, but before we go into that, I wanted to say one thing. I tried putting my Reddit video on the 2007 Scape Reddit because, to be frank, I really don't care about Reddit and found something kind of funny. The post needed to be approved by a mod, so until it's approved, only the mods and I can see the post. What I found mysterious is that the number of views it got was 92. I fully admit that about 30 of those were from me refreshing, but the other 62 are baffling, as there are only 10 mods on the subreddit, 9 of them human, 1 of them bottom. I can only guess what they were doing, but looks like something is going on behind the scenes. Anyways, let's jump into the video. Old School versus RuneScape 3. Most of Old School hates 3 and most of 3 hates Old School. You will sometimes find that player that enjoys both, maybe even plays both. I'm one of those people who plays and enjoys both, so today, going to go in depth on combat in the two different games. I will say, I am a noob, so I will be doing some of the smaller stuff, and this will be a series with many factors in it covering different parts. To start off with, a lot of people's biggest issue, evolution of combat. It's what drove many from the game. But what is it? It's a combat system where you use abilities to sometimes do more or less damage per second with fancy animations, much like World of Warcraft. So why is this bad? In a sense, it brought a lot of changes to combat and people didn't know what to do or how to work these abilities. Some abilities you must combo for extra damage, like stunning and then using the next ability, others you would need to do less damage to ready a more powerful ability. Some abilities also broke player versus player combat. Freedom breaks stuns, meaning if you ice barrage me, I can now move again and maybe escape you easier. Player killing became dead because most people can't seem to PK without using ancient magic. There are those few that are skilled in melee and or range. Not to mention the fact that with EOC, you can deal massive amounts of damage in very little time, much like stacking in Old School. You simply do not have time to react. If that wasn't enough, thanks to this update made it so prayers no longer protected you from all damage from most monsters. Instead of that full 100%, it does 50%, much like PvP, which means a lot of people were dying due to being unable to tank damage. But yeah, sitting behind full protection and taking no damage is much easier than actually taking damage and using more supplies and whatnot. But it goes well beyond this too. In Old School, you roughly gain 4 EXP for 1 damage dealt. In RuneScape 3, you get EXP based off the monster and only when you kill it. This no doubt means you can gain combat EXP much faster in most places, given you have the right gear and levels. Now what about bosses? In Old School, endgame bosses are pretty much corp, which many group up to do, Theater of Blood, again, group, Chambers of Zerdik, group, Zook, solo, and gives the best in slot melee cape, Nightmare, which is punishing, and Gauntlet, which requires skill and a quest line. So what boss can anyone go solo that is the quote hardest end quote? In this example, I'm going to use regular mode Nightmare as its harder version is solo only, and compare it to the hardest solo boss in RuneScape 3, Telos the Warden. You also don't get stronger bosses with weaker gear, so there is also a lot stronger gear in RuneScape 3 to balance it out. Old School is often concerned with power creep, but higher risk, higher reward. Stronger bosses, better loot, it's seen throughout both games already. Do you see the King Black Dragon dropping rapiers or Nox weapons? No. Some bosses simply can't be killed with gear alone though, or some may have more trouble than others, so to make it the game more playable, and in some sense, easier, extra tools were added. Such as enhanced Excalibur, a rather cheap crystal shard that restores prayer, maybe even some extra boosts to your damage, but these basically are aligned with potions. Something already in both games, and it is only a lack of skill, not the game being easier or harder. All you're doing is using less supplies in the long run. I'm not one to not show proof, so throughout this video you've seen me take on some bosses in both Old School and RuneScape 3, as well as player versus player myself. You can no doubt see the damage difference and the clearly different power of gears. Stronger gear makes some of the lesser bosses easier, but to get set gear, it's either buy or go farm a boss for who knows how long. Unless you're a iron, I'm pretty sure you didn't farm for your first rapier or bando's armor in Old School, or in RuneScape 3, Nox weapons, you most likely bought it. So why are you complaining that others are doing the same? You have no room to complain about power creep. So what if some of the easy bosses become easier? They are already easy. If you want to compare a rune sim to a rapier or a Zariti bow to a decimation bow, you do that, but that's just plain dumb. Comparing weak to strong and going in unprepared is not the game's fault, it is yours. So here's the take on combat in Old School versus RuneScape 3. Yes, gaining levels is faster in 3. Yes, there are more powerful weapons to face more powerful bosses dropped by more powerful bosses in 3, making lower bosses easier. Yes, the combat system is a bit more intense because you actually must think and react with abilities rather than compared to just moving and swapping prayers and sitting AFK behind full protection in 3. Making Old School easier. Yes, if you do it right, you do more damage per second in 3. Yes, player killing is dead for the most part in RuneScape 3, as most people can't kill without stunning the target. That's just a lack of skill. So if you enjoy player killing, 1.23 for being harder and showcasing Telos versus Nightmare, not even getting past phase 1, I will say Telos only gets harder as you kill it, and down the road, it has a one-shot attack. Instant death, making it much harder by mistiming or a misclick means death, where at Nightmare, at least you can recover. While the damage is less on Telos, if you go through the full fight, I promise you, he is like soloing Theater of Blood on normal mode in Old School, meaning it's doable, but most simply can't. So basing this off a point system, it looks like if you actually think, 3 points for RuneScape 3 being harder combat-wise, where Old School is also 3. Again, I am a noob, and if you add other things, maybe the score would be different, but early game combat in 3 is easier, mid-game is about the same, and end game is no doubt harder. Where Old School is harder in the beginning. Most skip the middle by farming crabs or Nightmare Zone, and then endgame is harder due to the fact they have these levels but no weapons or gear to kill these endgame bosses. Once they obtain gold to get the gear, or at least get the gear as a drop, it's simply a matter of learning. And that goes for 3.2. My next video will cover skills in Old School vs RuneScape 3, and until then, again, I thank you for your overwhelming support. It has not gone unnoticed. Don't forget to hit subscribe, hit that like button, and my Discord link is in the description, as well as the friend chat name. Until next time, keep on flexing, my flexers.